This woman started a lipstick company and sold it for 75 million bucks. Then she started another company and made $100 million last year. Her name is Bobbi Brown, and she is one of the most influential women in the world. Not only that, but she was the first beauty influencer. Long before Kylie and Selena made it cool to have beauty brands, there was just Bobbi Brown. She's here today to tell me how she did it and how she's breaking the industry all over again. So, Bobbi, when you're 34 years old, you've been working as a freelance makeup artist for about a decade, and then you come out with this natural line of lipstick. And that lipstick becomes the billion-dollar brand that we know today as Bobbi Brown. So I'm just wondering if you can take me back there for a minute and tell me, what was that first year or two like?
Well, I was 34 when we sold the company to Estee Lauder, so I started with just the lipsticks a couple years earlier. I think I was 32, and I was, working in the industry for about 10 years, at least. I mean, I worked my way up as a freelance makeup artist and somehow worked my way into Vogue magazine, got a cover, which was a big deal in the makeup world, met this guy, got married, moved out of the city to New Jersey, and got pregnant and didn't want to travel anymore. And around that time, I met a chemist at a store in New York, and I didn't realize it was pitching, but I told him I always wanted to make a lipstick, and he said I could do it for you. So I put together this collection of 10 lipsticks that he made for me that we split, and I started selling lipsticks basically out of my purse.
So you just happened to fumble into a billion-dollar brand. So let's go back for a second. So you create these lipsticks. What even gave you the idea or the need to create lipsticks? Like, there were plenty of lipsticks on the market.
Well, because I'm a makeup artist and because my style of makeup was different than the norm. It was different than what was in the magazines and different than what was at the store, for sure. I used to really struggle as a makeup artist that I couldn't buy and get traditional makeup to look good on people's faces. The colors were wrong. The textures were wrong. I thought they smelled bad. Everything just looked like makeup. And I've always been someone that really believed that people look better when they don't look like they're wearing makeup. So even with lipsticks, I could never find a lipstick that looked like I wanted it to look. I used to make my own. I didn't make my own, but I would fix things. I had hacks that I could take a lipstick, or I could take like a little blush, like a creamy blush, mix it with a taupe pencil, put a little Vaseline or lip balm and blot it on. So it just looked like a stained lip color. But you couldn't buy a lipstick that you could just put on to look like that. So when I met this chemist, I said, I just have this idea. And he said, I can make it for you. So he made me the first one, which is what I wanted for myself, which was a lipstick that I could literally just put on, blot my lips together, and have that color. It didn't exist. So I thought, wow, everyone's going to love this. I know so many people that would, but then I realized not everyone has the same color lips. So I needed variations of different colors. And trust me, I never thought I would have a company. I never thought I would be a brand. I never thought, a dollar amount. It was now we call it side hustle. It was just something for me to do. I'm like, wow, I could make a little money, little lunch money. And that was it.
So you were selling them at freelance gigs, I assume? You'd be at the gig and then you'd say, hey, you can also buy my lipstick.
Yeah. And so I started, oh my God, what is that lipstick? And I'm like, and I told them, and I would take orders, and I would, I didn't have it with me, but I would take orders. And then I started just selling them to friends. I'd sell them to moms in the park. I'd go to the park with my kids. I'd, start talking to people, and I would, sell a couple lipsticks. And then one day I was at lunch with an editor friend of mine who also was a new mom. And it was a social and a business meeting. And she said, what's going on? How are the kids? And then I told her about this new lipstick thing I'm doing. And she was the beauty editor of Glamour magazine. And she said, well, why don't I write about them? I'm like, why would you want to write about this? And so she wrote about it and put an 800 number in, or my home number, I don't even remember. and we got bombarded with calls. So we had a little side hustle. By the way, I was still a working makeup artist, commuting into the city, carrying my bags. My husband was in law school. I had this new baby, and I'd come home from work. My husband did law school at night because he had a regular job. I mean, it was quite the time, and we were in our early 30s.
And you get this write up in Glamour magazine. What happens the next day? Is your phone ringing off the hook?
Yeah, we got a lot of calls and a lot of, orders. And then we started just, like fulfilling them, and luckily my husband was super smart and a businessman, so he had to start like set up a business. I guess he set up
And
an
this is even
LLC.
before,
Yeah.
I was going to say, we're not talking about your Shopify store or your D2C business. You're selling them out of your purse. You're getting orders
Right.
over the phone. This is
Yes.
real old school.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I had a receipt to give them. And, I somehow knew, like, first of all, we didn't have boxes. So there were black lipstick cases that I chose out of a catalog. Actually, no, I didn't choose that out of a catalog. It's what the chemist had. So it looked to me like Chanel. I'm like, okay, this looks great. And we put it in a manila envelope. And I guess he told me that you have to give people the ingredients. So we wrote the ingredients on a card that fit in the manila envelope. And then I would put that small manila envelope into a bigger one to mail it to people. I didn't mail it. My husband did it. And then we started to get a lot of orders. So my sister-in-law would drive up from, South Jersey a couple times a week. And she would then go to the post office and go to the bank. And, she started doing our books. And we had a mini little business. And, the cash was small, but it was all helping.
And when did you get into Burgdorf Goodman? I think was your first retailer. How did that happen?
Well, sometime I must have been pregnant with my second kid. They're 2 years apart. So sometime during that, a year to a year and a half after we were selling it out of our house, friends of ours invited us to a party in the city. We went to this nice lady's house, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'm Bobbi. She goes, I know who you are. I'm a fan of your makeup. I said, oh, thank you so much. She knew me from the magazines. And I said, what do you do? She said, I'm a cosmetics buyer at Burgdorf Goodman. I had never shopped at Bergdorf. And I said to her, oh, I'm doing this thing. And I told her, she goes, wow, that's fascinating. Why don't you bring it in? We'd love to carry it. I said, oh my God, that would be so cool. I knew nothing. I mean, we didn't even have like outside of boxes. And she, said, okay, we'll take it. And that's it. And so we launched at Burgdorf Goodman. I mean, trust me, there was a lot of steps.
Of course, there's a lot of steps. And I read somewhere that you were planning or hoping to sell maybe 100 a week, and then you sold out right away. And the numbers were just off the charts
Yeah.
from the beginning, right?
Right. We thought we'd sell 100 the first month, and we sold 100 the first day. So when we had the opening. So yeah, it was, we were off to the races.
And this is all while you still just are carrying 10 lipsticks. So did you think about developing new things at that point?
Well, when, there were definitely people coming into the stores, into Bergdorf looking at what is this? And we didn't have a counter. We were on a table, like, with other cosmetics bags. We had a cool little stone display that my husband made because he's a developer. So he made it. And people, were buying it. And the president of the store came down and he said, wow, he couldn't believe how many people were coming in, because I guess through my other magazine work, other magazines started writing about this little teeny company. So more people knew about it. And he said, okay, we need more than lipsticks. So we then went to lip pencils, and then we went to eyeshadows.
This is all really demand driven. I mean, you had customers asking for it, you had buyers, now you have the president of a retailer asking for it. And then a few years later, I think it was 95, Estee Lauder comes along and buys it. How did that deal happen?
Well, we were the number one line at Burgdorf Goodman, which is crazy when you think about it, because we didn't have a full line of makeup, and we were still the number one line. So I guess we started eating some of the big brands' lunch. Then we launched at Neiman Marcus. So we started with 4 Neiman Marcuses, and we ended up becoming the number one line at Neiman Marcus too. So we were the number one line in both, which was crazy. I don't even know if we had skincare then. It's hard to remember back then. And I got a call one day through a mutual friend that Leonard Lauder was interested in meeting us, and I went to meet him and fell in love with him, and the rest is history.
Did you have ambitions at that point of selling the company, or you thought you would just run this forever?
I never thought about selling the company, And by the way, all the things that all the founders now start talking about, we want to scale, we want to take investments, we want an A, we want a B, I didn't know anything. I didn't need anything. I never took a nickel from anyone. We funded it ourselves. And, we ended up taking on business partners to launch, after we did just the lipsticks out of my house. We did, split the company with another couple who had more experience in the industry than us. So, it wasn't just my husband and I kind of figuring it out. We figured it out with these guys. We all brought different things to the table, and, we weren't for sale. And Lauder was not the first person that called. We had other people that called, and we just said, we're not for sale. And it just,
Really? You had multiple acquisition offers?
We did. I mean, it never got as far as an acquisition, but yes, we had a VC firm out of Texas. We had Shiseido came to us. We had many, many dinners, with the people from Japan. And there was another French company, I don't remember. But, we were kind of on top of the world. I mean, I was still a top makeup artist. So I would, be on every single magazine. And I became the person they would go to asking for advice. Bobbi, what's the trend of the season? Bobbi, what are people wearing? How do you do this? And my job was not to sell. I knew early on. It didn't make any sense for me to be I didn't want to be hawking my products, but I didn't even know it was a platform, but I had a platform to be able to talk about beauty and be the one that teaches people you don't have to wear all that makeup. And guess what? Your makeup should have yellow tones so it looks like you're not wearing it. It was kind of like totally against everything in the industry. You don't have to contour. You don't have to. I was the teacher. So I became, now, it's how I became a beauty guru, right? Because I gave people advice, but I also made the makeup.
So which came first, the brand and then you as a result, or were you already a kind of a big deal?
I was already, in my industry, a big deal. I did makeup for all the fashion shows. And when you do makeup for a fashion show, with the designer, you create a look. And I got to create a look using my products and then making a face chart. And then during the fashion show, when you're making up the models, you have a photographer taking pictures. But then you have all the outlets, the TV, the, newspapers, magazines, they're all there capturing photos. And, while I'm working, I've got microphones, Bobbi, what are we going to see? What's the trend? What's this? And I always know one thing, and that's to be myself. So I got known as being the person, next season, we're going to see a lot of, muted browns, but I don't believe in trends. Like I just would be who I was and not be this, fabulous character like people kind of expected. And it worked for me, not against me.
It worked for you in a big way. Whose idea was it to call the makeup brand Bobbi Brown?
It was not mine. It was not mine. I'm not sure because there was a bunch of us around a table in my house. And, a friend of my husband who was a graphic designer who did the logo, and the couple that were, ended up being our partners, we were all sitting around the table. I think my father was there too. And somebody said it, and I was like, okay. We were coming up with names. Like we were thinking, what do we call it? Basics, simple. Like it was always my concept. But someone said, just call it Bobbi Brown. And I'm like, okay.
And that was a pretty fateful decision because you then become this really the first beauty influencer. Like you were Kylie way before Kylie. You were somebody who had a platform in the 90s and the 2000s. And is that something that you kind of realized and ran with, or was it just kind of happenstance?
I'm a very funny person. I also, while this was all happening, I lived in the suburbs with my husband, then I had two kids, you know, I dropped my kid at school, as much as possible. I had my local friends. I wasn't living the New York life. I was living my life the way I wanted to live it. And, I always just kept going. Like even now, I don't think about what I did this past month or I'd be exhausted. I just keep going. Oh, okay, that's interesting. That makes sense. And people are like, I don't sit and have strategic meetings.
All right, so 1995, Estee Lauder buys you, and you actually signed a 25-year non-compete, which I want to get back to in a second. But they buy you for a reported $75 million. And then was your plan to just stay and run it, or did you think you'd have a quick exit?
No, I didn't never thought I would. No, it was my company. Yeah, I sold it, but it was still my company in my head. I went to work every day like it was my company. And guess what? Estee Lauder was thrilled. Leonard Lauder was the CEO and he believed in me more than anyone has ever believed in me. So all of a sudden I've got my naivete of what I think should happen. And I've got someone that thinks I'm, all that. So, and supported me on everything I needed. So in the beginning, it was just magic.
And I have to imagine that there were people out there on the Fifth Avenue office of Estee Lauder that were just terrified of you, because a 25-year non-compete tells me that they didn't want you out there doing something new anytime soon. So what was the dynamic like? Were you kind of welcomed with open arms? Were you the one that nobody wanted to work with?
No, I was welcomed with open arms. Everyone was great. I'm sure there was plenty of people that scratched their heads and just said, "What is this?" Right? I mean, and there was plenty of long time, you know, employees, because Lauder always has longtime employees that were incredibly giving and caring and gave me a lot of information, gave me, some of the best and some of the worst advice I've ever heard in the universe. But, it was back then, Estee Lauder was a family. I mean, Leonard treated everyone like they were part of the family, all of the employees, him and his wife, his then wife. It was a magic place to be. Every time we got invited to some fabulous museum party or something incredible, we sat at Leonard's table and he just introduced us to every single person. It was pretty remarkable.
And how did it evolve over a quarter century? I mean, was there ever a time that you thought, okay, I got to get out of here? Or were you just on cloud nine the whole time?
No, I mean, look, there's business and, things get tough and things mess up. Like it's just, it's part of business, right? You deal with it. Things don't come when they're supposed to. The lipsticks arrive and the caps don't fit. I mean, there's always issues and problems, and there's always people problems, right? I mean, some of the biggest problems where you hire someone you think is right and they're not. And, there was a lot of those kind of problems. So you deal with it. That's part of business, right? And trying to figure out how to make the right decisions. And like, I like all those challenges. And, I stayed 22 years as an employee. I left 4.5 years before my 25-year non-compete was up.
And was that a pleasant exit, or was it acrimonious?
No, it was not a pleasant exit. And it was really tough the last couple years. And, I actually have a memoir coming out in September. So, there'll be some more stories nicely told. But yeah.
So you start this new brand in 2020, Jones Road, and you started actually during the pandemic, I think. And so,
Actually, I started before the pandemic, but it launched during the pandemic.
and what was the idea behind? I mean, I'm guessing the idea was your non-compete is up, so let's do this thing. But what was the kind of thought behind that next company?
Well, I thought I was done and I tried doing a couple other things and I just didn't have my entire heart. I had a wellness brand, which we did supplements and powders and all sorts of things. done in for mass. I had done the luxury, and I'm like, all right, let me try my hand at mass. It was interesting, but certainly not successful. And my heart wasn't in it. Could I have fixed it? Maybe. Could I have brought in the right people? Maybe, but I didn't. And I missed the industry. But more than that, I saw things shifting and changing, and I had changed so much, being out of a corporate environment. And I needed to teach people that there's an alternative to applying a ton of makeup. There's an alternative. And I started messing around with products, and I fell in love with a bunch of them. And I said, okay, I'm going to do a little mini indie small company.
Sure. I mean, but it wasn't so small.
No, well, it's not so small. But when I started, I'm like, let me just, my first idea was I'm just going to make the best brown eyeshadow and I'm going to launch it on Etsy. That didn't happen either, but it would have been a good idea.
So what actually was so I think what I read was that there was was it a balm, a moisture balm or something?
Yeah, Miracle Balm. It is, yeah, it's this pot of makeup that is a combination. It's all clean formulas. And this is a hybrid skincare and makeup. So it really kind of lets you not put skincare on. It lets you not put makeup on. You put one thing, you could tint your skin. You could make it a blush. You can even get one without color. And it was, definitely something that didn't exist before.
So you have this innate instinct, I think, with lipsticks the first time and then this moisture balm or Miracle Balm the second time. It seems like your go-to market strategy is let's pick one hero product and that's going to represent the brand. Is that how you think about it?
No. You can't say I'm going to make a hero product. No, you don't know what becomes hero, right? You just don't know. Like you can't have a meeting and say, okay, we need a hero product. No, you make products that you love and you think are the very best. Some of them really resonate with your consumer, others not so much. And maybe you kind of have to fix them or get rid of them and do something else. So, Jones Road has made certainly the Miracle Balm. And we have a bunch of other things that are, if you look at our everyday sales that are, pretty close to the same amount of Miracle Balm that we sell. We've got 3 or 4 other products. What's a hero product? Hero product is, I think it's something that everybody wants that can't be duplicated. And trust me, people have tried. I see all the dupes.
So I understand that you can't predict that in advance, but I think a business needs to have, or at least in the cases that you've run, it needs to have something that people can stand behind, that it can be known for. That was kind of an accident, though. I heard a story where it was an accident, like you didn't actually want this product in the first place, right?
No, I didn't even want to open it. I could have very easily pushed it. Like I had asked someone for something. We made a brief. It finally arrived. I mean, it was during the pandemic. Everything took forever. And when it finally came, I opened it up and I was like, this is not what I wanted. And I could have just, thrown it in a drawer, but instead I stuck my hand in it and I went like this, rubbed my fingers together. I put it on my face and I'm like, and I looked in the mirror. I'm like, oh my God, look at how much better I look. And I said, this is a miracle. And that became a Miracle Balm. Someone said, wow, what should we call it? I said, all right, let's just call it Miracle Balm. They said, okay. And that's how easy, this new company was to start.
And so that was the first product. And this company, I think I read somewhere that you hit $20 million in the first year. You were named the fastest growing D2C beauty brand of 2021. Was this did you expect that at that point because you already kind of had done it before, or was it again a surprise?
I did not expect it at all. And, I remember the first year someone interviewed me and I said, I don't want another $1 billion brand. Well, guess what? my friend from, the VC world or from investments called me, says, do not say that ever again in the press. And, we're well on our way.
What's different? I'm sure the starting of obviously the first company was decades ago, but like you were running a business like this in 2014, 15. Is it very different today? Is it kind of a whole new world?
It's very different. There's so many things that are the same. You have to make something people want. And not only what they want, you have to make something that they want to buy more than once. You want replenishment. You want people to buy them again. You want people to tell their friends, their mothers, their, confidants, you must try this. You must try this. So that's the same. And it's got to be, you have to make a product that really represents you, because there's so many, inspirational products that brands do that are, or you can call them knockoffs, whatever. They get, people get inspired, and all of a sudden you see this market with all these different products. Well, why would people buy yours and not theirs? People are going to have nicer packaging than I'm going to do. People are going to have more marketing on the labels. I'm like, no, my formulas have to be superior in all different ways, because my packaging, especially with Jones Road, I want it to be easy. I want it to be cool. I want it to be simple. And I don't want to spend a lot of money on it. It's all stock packaging. And I have, the cool Jones Road logo on it, but it's not, oh my God, this is a fabulous little Fabergé egg, because that's just not what I believe in.
What do you think you're really good at? Obviously, you're a makeup artist, and even to this day, you're doing makeup on people's faces. But like, what do you think as a business leader and as a brand in yourself? What's your talent? Hey guys, real quick, if you're liking this video, I would love it if you could like, comment, and subscribe so I know to keep making this kind of stuff, and turn notifications on. Let's get back to it.
I'm highly visual, so I love. I have my own aesthetic. It's not the same as everyone's, but it's my aesthetic where I think people look the best. So I like to show people, with this beautiful glow, this beautiful, healthy look, whatever it is. And I want to make products that allows people to do that to themselves, that you don't need instruction manuals. You don't even need a makeup artist to show you how to do it, because though we have 10 retail stores, that's not the majority of our business. That is like maybe 5 to 10% of our business. And you have to be able to understand it when you go online and look at it on the website, and then you get it home, it's got to work for you. So I think I don't think, I know I'm good at formula, and I'm really good at, making sure I have the right team around me to help me do what I need to do. I think those are probably my two strengths.
It sounds like that. It sounds like in the early days, you were talking about how your husband was obviously by your side and you had another couple that was working with you. It sounds like you know how to surround yourself with people and you don't have much of an ego about it. Because a lot of people in your position would say, well, I know everything. I can do it all. That never really fazed you.
I know what I don't know. And, I think because I was never a good student. Like, school was not my thing. I struggled. I'm purely a visual creative person that happens to have a lot of common sense and street smarts, just like a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm also really kind of, in a weird way, sensible. Coming from Chicago, I'm just very like, no, tell me yes or no. When could we do this? How much is it going to cost? Should we do it? So I'm really practical. Where a lot of entrepreneurs have like, big ideas and, it doesn't make sense. Why are people spending all this money having these fabulous influencer dinners that cost $10,000, $50,000 for what? I'll invite people to my backyard and I'll have, I'll barbecue and have, a different experience, and you get the same ROI.
I mean, listen, a lot of people don't realize, I got to tell you, like people, even right now, like you're sitting here, you got your headphones on, you're talking to me. It looks like you're in your office or your family room. I talk to so many people at your level who are just obsessed with the look of this and the sound of that. And I say, guys, it's just a conversation. It's just about the quality of the conversation. Just in your case, it's the quality of the product. It's not about the packaging and everything else.
Right. And just in general, like never forget when someone said authenticity is the trend. I'm like, what does that mean? I've been authentic my whole life. Like I tried to be other than who I was, and it didn't work. And when I realized I just got to be myself, it works. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't stress about things I can't change. look, I want to be better. I want to, I want to keep growing. I want the same or better quality. I want all these things. I don't like to waste time, money, or energy.
You started on TikTok, I think, not that long ago. And how have you found social media in launching this business and in running this business versus never having it for the first 25 years?
Right. Well, I mean, look, I'm a social media, aficionado, I guess. I spend a lot of time on Instagram. It soothes me, it calms me down. I'm not afraid of it. I've hopped on different social media things, and I'm not on them anymore because, you hear about it, you try it. Oh, sure, Threads, let me try it. Whatever. And there's all the real, what was the one that was like the real or something? I'm like, no, 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 no. So I'm not afraid of it. I'm whatever. I do love Instagram because I'm a visual being, but I also realized I can go on Instagram and ask a question and get an answer instantly without spending a lot of money, hiring one of those companies that does, all the, whatever it's called, the testing and, ask people's opinions. And, I've had people come to me and say, well, this is the data. I'm like, well, who did they ask? They asked 30 people. I'm like, who are these 30 people? Like, I could ask 50 people. I could ask, 1,000 people. Like, so, I just think social media is a great way to get your message out there, to visualize what you're trying to do, to get people's opinion. I mean, if I go and ask what color something you want me to do, I get overwhelmed, but I get so much information that guess what I do? I go to my product development team and ask, the youngest, newest person on the brand, can you please go into my Instagram and write down all the different things that people said? Because I know I won't have the focus to go back and look at it again.
And is it also a big business driver? I mean, if you announce a new product on social media, I'd imagine that boosts sales big time, right?
Oh yeah, of course it does. And if my son, who's our CMO, who was our digital growth guy, was here, he would tell you how difficult it is becoming and how much more it's costing to acquire customers and all that stuff. Okay, great. That's his department. My department is I get the message out. People know something's coming tomorrow. And, we do, like, there's a Jones Road account, which I don't touch. There's the justbobbi.com, which I am the only one that does it, except when my assistant helps me on something. And sometimes we do collab things. And, I know I have a pretty big audience, especially when you put the two together. So
it goes a long way.
Yeah.
Do you have a sort of, it's a dumb question, I know, but do you have like a 5-year vision with this business, or it's like just day by day?
It's not day by day, but I don't have a 5-year. I mean, I know, we had a calendar meeting yesterday, which are my favorite meetings because we just had a room with all of the product that we've been working on. We have it by months, and then, eventually it kind of get less things on trays. But I think we have product in the pipeline. We talked about 27 yesterday, like where we're putting. And then, since I come from experience, I have the most experience of anyone that works here. We have an amazing team, but a pretty young team. Like, I know, the difficulty of anniversarying. You do something so magic, and then a year later, you're like, why are we down? And so you have to kind of figure things out because you can't just keep doing the same thing. You have to reinvent it, whether it's a different color packaging or a certain bag that goes with it or a new color makeup. So I love those kind of meetings. So I know what we're doing the next year and a half. We're not for sale. I'm not looking for investments. I'm not looking for a strategic partner. And, there's lots of people that come to my door and through people and want to meet. And I don't even take the meetings because it's a waste of time right now.
I was going to say, it took 4 years the first time. I'd imagine it took 4 hours the second time. As soon as you launch Jones Road, someone's going to want to buy you.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've not had like where someone calls and says, "Here's $2 billion." Okay, well, then you would get my attention. So I don't know, but and also my biggest thing is if I sold Jones Road, what would I do? I'm 68 years old. This is my hobby. This is my happy place. Besides, hanging with my granddaughter, who's my best friend, and it's like, this is what I do. I would go out of my mind. I would start another business, but I love this one so much.
Yeah. But you don't look 68, by the way. I have to say that for all those who are listening and not watching. It reminds me of, there's a quote by Mark Zuckerberg when he was offered early on to sell Facebook for $1 billion. He said, well, if I sold it, I would just start a new social network. And I kind of like the one I have now. So I'll just keep this one. And I get that vibe from you. I take it you don't really have hobbies. I mean, your whole life has been making product and doing makeup. Do you do other things?
Of course I do. First of all, I have a really happy marriage of 37 years. So I spend a lot of time with my husband. And, especially the kids are grown and out of the house. Our three kids are incredibly close to us. We spend a lot of time with them. We have really good friends that we love, that we, meet for dinner and, on occasion travel with. So I'm pretty busy that way. Again, I have my granddaughter and now a new grandson who's 3 months old, and they're in my town and I see them all the time. And, I walk, I exercise, I do weights. I have things on my list I want to do. I don't play tennis. I don't play pickle. I don't play cards. I don't needlepoint. So my hobbies are, I say I don't have hobbies. I don't garden. I love organizing. Like, for me, I could literally open a drawer or a closet. You would walk in my house, think it's the most organized thing. I always see things that could be better. So I recently started hiring an organizer to come in and do little projects, and there is nothing better. I think because I'm so overwhelmed and busy all the time, if I can open up a drawer or a cabinet and it's all neat and compartmentalized, I feel calm.
Do you run Jones Road today as a family business? You mentioned your son is the CMO. What's your title? Are you the chief creative officer?
I'm the chief creative officer and founder. I remind everybody that I'm not just the chief creative officer, but it wasn't set out to be a family business. I started Bobbi Brown with my husband. I started this lipstick thing with my husband. So it's not he does his own thing. It is just his side hustle. So when and Stephen is really the one that pushed me for Jones Road. He said, "You got this. We'll start it with just, this much money. Here's an office space." He's a developer. He's like, "Here's your office. Here's this. We got this. Oh, you want a store? I have an available space." So he's my dream catcher. He is the unofficial chairman of our board. We have, we have two other friends on our board besides, my son, who's the CEO and our COO of the company. And,
Do you have investors, or is it just?
No, we don't have any investors. And we literally paid ourselves back in the first couple months after we launched Jones Road. It's, look, this is not a normal thing. I mean, I come from, a lot of experience and success, and we kind of somehow did the right things, with Jones Road, which you would never expect would be the right things. Like when you get your first product from Jones Road, it comes in a paper lunch bag. It's because it was inexpensive. It was cute. It was cool. You could reuse it, and bring your lunches to work. And now it's become this cult thing. People wait for us to launch a new version of the lunch bag, that basically cost, under $1 to make. So,
But I think that goes to your aesthetic, and this is what I hope everyone listening gets out of this. You actually made it a part of your brand. It was natural skin tones. You wanted a lipstick that made it look like you weren't wearing a lipstick. You do your social media and your aesthetic in a way that it's very girl next door. It's very attainable, and that's actually worked for you such that it's actually become a part of your brand. You said people wait for this lunch bag, as opposed to waiting for something super expensive and fancy.
Right. Yeah, people like what they can't get, first of all. So, you can't go into a store and get this bag unless we have certain, kits that we offer. So, it's to me, I love the creative process of figuring out what we could do or try to, to get a win, whatever it is, and it's interesting. And I think of it with everything. I mean, from my kids were little, doing their birthday parties, that was like my brain putting all the things, the creative things, the pieces together. And it's with, when we have a tough month, we all sit down and say, all right, now what are we going to do? And we're like, all right, what's in the hopper? What's this? What if we do this? What if we pull that out? And then you try it and hopefully it works.
Well, Bobbi, it's been working for you, and I so appreciate you joining me today and sharing the story.
Aw, thank you. It was a pleasure. You're very good at this. You're very good at this.